All right, hello everybody. This is a great crowd. I'm absolutely impressed. I didn't think that this topic would land so well, which is wonderful because it's interesting. As I was researching it, I was like, this is a lot better than, not I was expecting. I was expecting it to be good, but it was great. So I'm hoping for those of you who live in Golden Valley who are really ensconced in the history, you'll learn some new things. And if you're less familiar with Golden Valley, you're going to learn a lot. So again, I just want to welcome all of you. This is a talk, mid-century commercial architecture. Golden Valley's rise from village to city. My name, again, is Bobak. That's kind of something I always like to put at the beginning of my talks. And when I teach law. I don't look it. I'm in the undercover division. But yeah, it just makes it a little easier. So again, without further ado, I am with Docomomo, the Minnesota chapter of Docomomo USMN. Docomomo, it stands for Documenting and Conserving the Modernist Movement. The Dutch came up with this, and they thought it was cute, so we always have to then explain to everyone why they came up with it. It's got a very strong U.S. U.S. kind of district, and Minnesota's probably the most active chapter. So what we do is we put on a lot of programs where we do talks, where we do tours of many houses. Our biggest event is the fall tour, where we see lots of houses of the mid-century style that kind of have a lot of that decor. We do other projects. We did a lot of work for last year's national theme, which was places of worship. So we did a lot on that with visiting various churches and synagogues in the metro. We also do bus tours. We're about to go to Mankato. That'll be really interesting. We're looking forward to that. There's a lot of interesting stuff down there as well. So we do lots of things. So that's Docomomo. I'm one of the board members, and we've got several of those here as well. In fact, one of the guests. So the thing I do is I do a lot of our research. And so probably the biggest thing I do is what we call the Minnesota Modern Registry and map behind me. It's a publicly available map. I've researched probably at this point over 11,000 structures across kind of the five-state area. And I'm not saying these are all museums or things that need to be preserved, but it's just a matter of documentation. To understand the built environment, it really helps to kind of look these things and understand what we're working with. So without further ado, I just want to make a couple quick acknowledgments. I want to thank the Golden Valley Historical Society, Lynn, who just introduced me, Jim Ellert, and Carla Rose for helping set this up. I wanted to, of course, thank the rest of the board of Docomomo USMN. I wanted to thank the General Mills Archives Department, specifically Senior Corporate Archivist Natasha Bruns, who gave me some very useful material. I think she said she was coming tonight. Oh, there you are. Thank you. Jamie Heilicher, who's a member of our board, but is also going to be speaking in a very interesting part of this talk as a guest speaker. I also want to acknowledge the Hennepin County digital collections are excellent, and honestly, the longer that time goes on, Google Street View is so invaluable. When things get demolished and you need to see what they looked like in 2010 or 2012, that, I got to be honest, has become one of the most useful tools in my quiver. All right, let's get this moving because there's a lot I'd like us to go through. I'm just going to say, and sometimes this is longer in my talks, and I do talk fast, I apologize. Somebody said I sound like a podcast set at 1.5 speed. All right, but there's a lot to get to, and I promise I want to make it efficient. So what is modernism? What is modern as we kind of get into that? It's technology. We're talking about new materials being introduced in construction, steel, reinforced concrete, new processes such as mass production. We're talking about design and a rejection of old styles, just kind of repeating things for the sake of repeating them. Stale revivalism and eclecticism, the Beaux-Arts, for example. Commercial architecture is always interesting because they've always typically been at the vanguard of this movement. As companies want to look and appear forward-thinking, progressive, and modern, they would be quicker to, I'd say, embrace that. Because, again, last year I was talking a lot about churches. They were much slower to say, like, yeah, let's do something completely radical. But commercial architecture and houses, absolutely. So kind of jumping into this, I've broken this into basically 5 pretty simple sections. Trying to understand the history of commercial architecture in the city of Golden Valley. I first want to talk a little bit about the early years. So Golden Valley, as it entered into the post-war era, it's right at the cusp of 2 clear kind of phases. Now, I want to acknowledge the city of Golden Valley commissioned a really interesting context report that the Historical Society has available on their website. I recommend if you want, check it out. It's over 100 pages, but it reads really fast. And I really enjoyed it. But one of the points it made there, and it's absolutely backed by all the research I did, Golden Valley kind of falls into two patterns here. There was, at first, while many cities will kind of go through this sort of development pattern of nuance, displaying layers upon layers of reuse, replacement, or outright neglect, Golden Valley's pattern is relatively simple and straightforward. As they put, Golden Valley had two general areas, the agrarian pre-mid-20th century settlement and farming period, and then what we got after, really around the post-war era, this move into the modern suburban development, particularly from 1930 to 1975. The village did start to try a planning commission and try to plan its sort of designs, partly to qualify for worker WPA funds in the New Deal, and they had a zoning code already in place by 1939. Then some stuff happened in the 1940s, and it got put on the shelf, and then they got back to it a little bit later. We pick up a book. So all of that said, I love this picture when I was doing research. This is an example of commercial issues that were occurring in the city of Golden Valley in the 1930s. This gentleman decided to build a 74-foot-long chicken coop on the back of his house, and his neighbors were not happy about it. But this is, it's cute, it's silly, but this to me was like an example of that, the echoing of the agrarian era of the city. That house is brand new, by the way. But of course, you still had other commercial developments. A lot of it, again, were more sort of entertainment areas. You had the Point Supper Club. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. You had the White House, which looked quite different as it got rebuilt and redone, but I love this older photo of it. And you have Schuler's, which is still out there, of course. Built in the 20s, was originally a gas station. In fact, it's so funny, when you look at old photos from the 40s era and before, there's gas pumps right here, right at the point. Those were gone by the 50s. And then, again, Schuler's with its kind of loggy cabin approach to it. You had the original Jensen's Super Value. And Ewald Brothers, which I'm sure you guys have had talks about, that was the biggest dairy distributor in the Twin Cities, and they had a lot of, well, frankly, when I was doing research, I actually came across the houses of where the sons of the founder lived in this area. Most of them are still up there. I kind of want to research them later, but I was too busy with this. But again, like you see a lot of that kind of the era of agrarian development in the city. I'd say the first, though, modern building, and it came still in this early era, was the old Golden Valley Theater. It was built in 1949. I love this little sketch of it. By the way, I love it. Where did those Cybertrucks come from? Sorry. So, yeah, I know. All right. All right. But it's sort of a fascinating thing. So it was built as the first suburban-style theater in this area of the metro with its low, sweeping lines, glass-enclosed lobby. I love the original marketing materials. It remindful of California, home of filmdom. The exterior was white stucco with maroon granites. The ticket office was located inside to escape the weather, and the auditorium sat, they say, about 800. And it also, like many other, I'd say, theaters of this era, had a commercial element, so there was a hardware store on that side of it. The opening film was the Barclays of Broadway, starring Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Now, the problem was it got ahead, I don't want to use a football term, but kicked ahead of its coverage. It was built out here before there was enough people to really make it commercially viable. So within a few years, it was sold. The buyer, Kenneth Dahlberg, was looking to move his growing audio engineering company. He had, several years earlier, left a company named Telex to start his own kind of audio engineering company and sell hearing aids, and then he developed something called the Miracle Ear, and then it went from there. All these years later, by the 50s, Ken Dahlberg was recognized by the city of Golden Valley in many issues because he was the first person to bring a big business into the area. So this structure survived into the 70s, but was eventually demolished and is the current site of the post office, which just down the street on the way here. So the building is no longer there, but that was, I'd say, the first modern commercial piece of architecture in the city. The other aspect we want to talk about in parallel in these early years is transit and utilities. It sounds dry, but it's vital to getting commercial development because Golden Valley, while they had more residential opportunities in the late 1940s, it lagged in industry and retail development compared to its neighbors like St. Louis Park and Hopkins because there were no real utilities there to support things, water, sewer, and even street servicing, while a residential person might have the tolerance to get their own well or their own septic system. It's sometimes hard to bring in that commercial and industrial development. So it took a while for that to develop, and that was one of those pressing issues. Rail and transit never really got here. There was a great note that apparently the city made an invitation for the city streetcar to come out into the city, and everyone's like, no, we're good. So it just never got here. Roads, though, became quite important. As we know, there were many arteries that kind of came into this area. I mean, Lilac Drive, the Beltway, Highway 100, which is AKA all the same thing, pictured here. You had 6th Avenue North extending out of North Minneapolis and becoming Olson Memorial Highway. You had Wayzata Boulevard, which I did not realize was renamed. It was Superior, and it became Wayzata Boulevard because the mayor of Wayzata asked them to rename it. He was for marketing purposes. But then it became Highway 12 and 394. All of these things started to bring in more people. And then the next aspect I want to really quickly talk about, I love this map. I found this in the phone book from 1951. That is a street map of the city of Golden Valley. If you know Golden Valley's borders, that's basically it. You see how patchwork it already kind of was. Just to kind of talk about that, in the north you have the sections that are basically spilling over Crystal and Robbinsdale. You have the east side, which is on the edges of Minneapolis. You have St. Louis Park down here. Then you have different pockets. This one's by the old, it's still there, the sheriff's radio station, which is actually really cool mid-century work, but that's not commercial architecture. But there was this need to infill, but also this problem because the residences, it was costly to make the sewers go everywhere and make the water go everywhere. So you see these battles from the 1950s. It took it from 1953 to 1956 to finally get the patchwork of sewer systems to connect the city. And then it took until May 1961 for the city to finally get a municipal water system that would connect to its neighbors. Before that, noted here, most residents now get water from private wells. And even though the engineering firm had created the design years earlier, it took a while for the city to get around to actually paying for it. All of this is important because the parallel track here that is really important to understand why commercial architecture, why commercial development is so vital to a city. And I'm going to be clear, when I say commercial, I am bridging what we consider industrial into the commercial sphere here. It's the tax race. It is the great game of suburban mid-century towns. There was a good series of articles in '57 in the Tribune. As suburban taxes climb, homeowners as well as village and city councilmen are looking for new sources of revenue to pay bills piled up by schools and local governments. Most suburbs hope to find that money through industrial expansion. So the great game was afoot, as I like to put it. In a survey of 14 suburban communities in the metropolitan area in 1957, only Morningside, Robbinsdale, Richfield, and Hopkins said they were not working for industrial development. The others, caught in a tax squeeze which faces growing villages and cities, want industrial growth. These towns are, I love it, bursting their britches with people. In some cases, they have 10 times as many residents as they did a decade ago. And therefore, you can see you need these things to support schools, you need these things to support fire protection. So they had to get a way to develop this. Ironically, people were leaving the cities to get away from high taxes and heavy traffic. Well, they brought heavy traffic, and by 1957, among the metro area cities, Minneapolis was ranked 37th out of 49 because the others had to raise their taxes so high to pay for all the things that people wanted when they moved into the city. And they were actually paying 41st out of 48 in school taxes. Now, the problem was I named 4 cities that weren't in the race. Richfield is a great example. This is the city of Richfield in 1957. I superimposed the borders of the town. If you notice, it's pretty full. And the problem is, this is a bedroom community. It already filled in with houses. That is not great for a city tax base. If you understand kind of this, you get some taxes from residents, but the real tax dollars come from industry and commerce. So Richfield was kind of in a pickle. Morningside is now part of Edina because they really had to just give up because they were a small residential neighborhood. Robbinsdale, similarly. Now, on the opposite side, everyone wanted to be Hopkins. Hopkins very early on got on the industrial train, and by 1957, 60% of their local taxes were coming from industry and commercial that were already in the city of Hopkins. It was really interesting that one of the notes was Red Owl Stores used to have a giant warehouse out there, and when they moved onto Excelsior Boulevard, they were welcomed with open arms by Hopkins and maintained happy community relations ever since. Now, the other issue here is people wanted industry, but they didn't want nasty industry. So there was this great interview with Golden Valley Councilman Ralph Stark. He said, any explanation of industry's growth in Golden Valley has been an extension of sewer, water, and gas, but we don't want any, quote, we don't want any industry that could be detrimental to the community. You know, big smokestacks, the slaughterhouse smells. We do welcome factories that look like schools. I love that phrase because you're going to see some of what I'm talking about here in a second. So let's go in the next big phase here, the big businesses. And the big three arrived pretty quickly in the 50s. General Mills, it's a local food concern. No, my wife used to work for Target, and when I go somewhere, I'm like, she works for a local store. You know, so anyways, we all know that the landmark campus that's right there where 169 and 394 come together. But let's go to the early days. So again, this is considered one of the more important works, one of the most important part of the post-war trend of corporations moving to large suburban corporate campuses. It was really its only serious predecessor was what we historically call, and I should warn you, some of these buildings you're gonna recognize them, but I'm gonna be using the original name or the original tenant. So some of them not the tenant, but you know. But again, so Prudential moved right on the west side of Minneapolis, the giant building off of Brownie Lake. You see it used to be Target Financial Services, I think, most recently, and I don't know exactly who the main tenant is now, but it's still an office building. That was the first major commercial company to move its headquarters or move its regional headquarters in that sense outside of downtown Minneapolis. General Mills was the next big one to do that. Now, this took many years to get going. General Mills had purchased this 40-acre tract in summer 1954, announced formal plans to move to Golden Valley in February 1955, calling for this building. Initially, the plan was pretty straightforward. They were originally going to only do 3 stories, including the basement. It grew a little bit. So then we finally got what we would describe this building now, the 4-story structure, including the basement, with glass curtain walls, extruding aluminum framing, and some use of granite on the exposed areas on the first floor. It was connected to a smaller 3-story building here in the back. It has these wonderful decks, by the way. I never appreciated it until I saw these historic photos. And the first floor of the main building also included the Betty Crocker kitchens. And again, those were designed separately by Walter Dorwin Teague. This structure was designed by the major national firm of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, SOM. Interestingly enough, as I kept talking about, if you look at the dates, 1956 and 1958, you'll know that this was probably planned before all that sewer and water was in place. So they knew that. This whole structure, they had to dig wells for it, and they had to create its own sewer system. And this building actually has, technically it's a 5-story building. We call these things kind of mechanical penthouses on top. One thing it lacks that was very common in that era, especially for a building that doesn't have water attached to it, is a water tank on top. They actually came up with a very novel way to bury the water tank on the property and use, SOM, they're very good engineers. They came up with a way to have a water tank off the roof. It's really funny. I was looking up articles about it in the 1950s, and in the 1960s, they went back and said, that was a building where SOM proved you didn't have to put a water tank on top of a building, because it was like a really novel idea. General Mills, apparently somebody really must have liked aesthetics, because they were like, yeah, let's not have it on the roof, let's have it like clean look. And then you got this wonderful glass clean box. There's a site before they put anything there. So to give you an idea, this is 394, this is 169. So as we're kind of talking about that. Then they built it. It had this wonderful little courtyard in the middle. I have a photo of that coming up. This is the original way it was designed. The water tank was actually back here. They purposely kind of stacked it up a little bit and hid the vents in this kind of planter area. Again, you could see, and I'll give you a better aerial view in a second to give you a sense of context, but it's really nice. I love these decks on both sides. So this was the executive offices as well as the cafeteria. So again, the workers there had a chance to kind of, in those wonderful days where the weather is acceptable, kind of go out there. Associate Professor of Art Donald Torbert at the University of Minnesota, who wrote a lot on the history of architecture and really kind of wrote some very good critiques, he called this the most beautifully proportioned structure built in Minnesota this century. The materials are exquisitely handled, from the granite foundation blocks to the steel and glass of the walls. The bulk of the 2 sections, as when you're driving a 169, are perfectly balanced against each other. And actually, it was really interesting, too. It was featured in a centennial summary, because this is around the time Minnesota celebrated centennial, of an example of those designs. It's still under construction here. That's why you see the little tape on the windows. But again, it gives you an idea. It's very hard to build a structure like this and keep it clean, because any error gets very obvious the further you get from the error when you deal with such clean lines and precision. I do love that original sign. That is absolutely fantastic. And weather vane in it. And this is, I love these. This is the original courtyard that they had. Where flowers were going to bloom. You saw it kind of squared. It's got a, looks like it's got a dome over it now. And then, you know, the employee lounge. And I love this photo of, I assume, employees picnicking on the lake. And I zoomed in. They're eating and smoking. Again, 1950s. So, because you see the woman kind of like this, and like no one holds your fingers in your face like this, unless. Again, so the building had its big grand opening in June of 1958. I love looking at the ads in these things. In those days, there were tons of ads in the paper when some big thing opened. So here's the open house, come on over. You have the congratulatory ad, so the general contractor would put their big ad naming everyone who worked on the building with all the little phases. You know, different subcontractors put in their ads, you know, wow, 3.1 million pounds of steel. You know, the nursery that put the mature trees in. You know, water. I love this one because, again, like this, you know, this new building depends on 2 new 24-inch wells. This job because, you know, with no municipal water supply, this was necessary. You know, somebody wanted to advertise a steel case furniture going in. The printing company, I love this. These are all products that General Mills was making at the time. And those, I did not know there was Cheery Oats, for the record. This one I actually took a second to understand. You know, Northwestern Banks, I love this. There are all these different styles. There's the Betty Crocker kitchen. So again, they were having some. I love these stools. These are really fantastic. I don't know. Kind of not culturally great, but Prudential wanted to say like, hey, another big corporate office out here. So again, I do love this. Dayton's very fitting. This is it looks like they had their own artist do a sketch of the building. And then expansions start to happen. What is now known as the Bell Tower, based off of the original founder CEO, it was started in 1966. It was designed to be added to. So it actually only started as 4 floors. Here we can see it in 1966. Here you can see it finished. So again, the kind of matches the overall design. And you can see, by the way, the sign has now shifted to the logo we all know. And then again, they started to build the East Building. This was by a Chicago firm, A. Epstein & Sons. And now you can see, again, the whole complex as completed. Then they started to add the additional floors to the Bell Building. So now we see how it looked for a good decade and a half or so, until the next major project. Let's kind of keep moving here. So then HGA did a major addition and campus renovation in 2002 to 2003, which actually gained them a Minnesota AIA award. That's part of the new buildings. I took that out of a plane in 2009, which is kind of funny to see this. Here's another quick progression. I just want to show you the aerial view really quick. So this is that same corner in this is 169. This is 394, so you can see the project as it's added. By 1964, you can see they're already adding to the parking lot. And again, it's funny to see how simple the access points are to this. By 1967, you start to see the beginnings of the bell tower. You start to see Betty Crocker Road coming in. By 1966, again, you start to see the East Building coming in there. 1971, we're starting to see the mature campus. And then jumping all the way to 2024, we see everything that is out there now. So again, moving on to the other one, I wanted to also talk about the James Ford Bell project that they did, the research center, a little bit north of there. So I love this, again, this image. This is Plymouth Avenue. Basically, 169's out here. This was an interesting design because they wanted a huge, this was planned alongside, but they built it after what they called the general office, later the world headquarters. They hired the New York firm of Voorhees, Walker, Smith & Smith. They were familiar with designing modular research labs. They'd already done the Bell Labs in New Jersey. They did the Argo National Laboratory outside Chicago. They were very good at this idea of building these research buildings that could be modular and you could add on to it. The original plan was basically a 5-phase construction program that was designed to have a main stem and then sections coming off of it that would have physics, administrative offices, analytical research, etc. General Mills planned this new facility to permit them to explore new areas, not only in food, but other areas. Secrecy was important to General Mills, not because they were doing necessarily like skunk works or anything like that, but because they were actually, in food, they were worried about trademark and copyright and patentability of things. So anything, it was about being first to market, so you had your own campus out here. By the way, when they described this in their original description, they said it'll be like a college campus, because again, it looks like a factory, it looks like a school. Well, a research campus looks like a college. There you go. As you can see, they built it. By the way, this was how they built it in phases. This is the first section is lighter, and then they started to build the rest. So here they are mid-construction. Here it is as fully realized in its initial design. This is a better example. That's Medicine Lake back there. This side faces south. As you can see, again, another cool sign for it. And then updated a little bit, and updated a little bit there. Go back to the other one. Yeah. So, as you can see, again, pieces of it got it down to, and then they kind of started to leave the original design as it went beyond that. This is one of the most recent additions. It's quite a huge complex up there. It's tucked back there. You have to know it's there. So there it is in 1960, that first phase being built. Again, Mendelssohn Avenue. This is what is now 169. You have Plymouth Avenue. You have Boone, which turns into, a little further down, turns into General Mills Boulevard. And by 1962, they'd already built it that big. Now let's move over to Honeywell really quick. So Honeywell, this building, some of you may know it's also Residio now. This is what originally was. Ignore this. In those days, sometimes they didn't know where the hell these places were, so they just say, Minneapolis. Or if you do research about Lake Minnetonka, you either lived in Wayzata or Excelsior, because depending on what side you lived, and then it takes me forever to figure out where it actually was. So in this case, this was built right off of Douglas Way. It was the central distribution center for the entire company. This is one of the biggest. This grows into the second largest industrial building in the entire state, or entire city, I should say, after the Ford plant. But this was the original version of it. It was 75% distribution and 25% plastics plant. It grew into a much larger plant. I love this picture, of the steel frame they were using in it. Designed by Ellerbe and Company, it took a little while to get this thing off the ground because it didn't build on the typical places of 55 or 394. It decided to build a little bit further out, turning into a big lawsuit that eventually settled in the the Minnesota Supreme Court, which went on the side of the city that allowed them to rezone it as industrial. It kept getting added onto, as you can see, all of these sections. This is the 1965 article that was talking about how big it was going to get. They were right. 1965, I do love this. This is 1966. Your friends at these same plants are assembling increasing amounts of classified munitions and weapons for shipment directly to our troops in Vietnam. Different era. A few years later, that one wouldn't go over so well. So then there was a problem. They wanted to change it into more, they wanted to move all of their residential offices under one roof. They didn't need all the factory space or warehouse space. So there was this great plan. How do you turn something that was built as a giant brick warehouse into an office building? And what they had was an award-winning plan. So this is, I like this because this is the overall footprint. The idea was take the building as it is, dig down the foot. They actually, as they were looking into it, the engineers at HGA, Hamel, Green, and Abramson, discovered that the ground was wasn't built well. So they decided to dig out the entire floor, dig it down a little bit, build a new floor, and then in that already tall warehouse area, put a mezzanine level on what they called trays in order to create bigger workspaces. And then they created these skylights to kind of create more light, more natural light, and create avenues. You can kind of see an example of 4 of the trays here. None of them touched the walls. They were just sort of floating in these open spaces. And then to do that, this shows you kind of what they were doing on the inside. You see the trays, you see the streets. They put trees in there, and that was the concept. So this ended up winning an AIA Minnesota award in 1984. Again, because they thought it was remarkable that you would actually do this. The building now keeps a lot of that look. It's an enormous structure. It's really hard to take a good picture of this thing. But again, now Residio, which was spun off, I believe in 2018, is also there, but also so is Honeywell. It's just an enormous structure. This kind of gives you a good idea. 1953, this is the area. Honeywell purchases 100 and something acres over there. Lilac, so AKA 100. St. Croix Avenue was cutting right through, and then you have Douglas. Eventually, they got the thing built. There you see the original footprint, much smaller. And wait till you see how big this thing gets. By the way, this is that's the MnDOT district headquarters. That's right off of Douglas. I love that they built the Douglas exit without the street. The street comes shortly after. Part of the agreement, Honeywell said, is they funded this. They funded making Douglas, not Douglas, Duluth kind of come through to the building right there, as well as improving Douglas for traffic purposes. As you can see, in 1962, this building is already getting quite big. And the manufacturing area is starting to outsize the warehouse area. And some of you may be familiar with that gorgeous former Kingdom Hall right on that corner of Duluth and Douglas. There it is appearing there. And that's the former Golden Valley Junior High School and then became known as Sandburg Junior High School. So now we see by 1964, Duluth has been brought through and comes there. And then by 1969, this building just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And 1994, you see the conversion. I love this design. I love this. The landscape design and landscape plan of it. That's the real last good view we have of it, because by 2025 they had sold off this area and it became a separate building. Next major of the big three was Tennant. They made cleaners at the time, especially at the time they were known for their mechanical cleaning machines and the cleaning products that are still the backbone of their company. They decided they wanted to move out to and build a $1.25 million structure, there we go. One-level structure that could be useful for them. Here we see the building today. It's an enormous structure. I just wanted to go over this really quick. So 1956, they were clearing out the land for it. 1957, you see the original structure here with a classic design. You have a giant warehouse or manufacturing plant attached to the office area. By 1960, you see it in its mature, and then by 2025, they've added a little bit to it. It's absolutely bonkers how big that building is. And they're actually, I joke, they're like the very hungry Caterpillar. They have bought everything south of them. Like all of this is now owned by them. They've demolished a lot of buildings. This used to be the Bertelsen Brothers office, like they used to make office furniture, sell office furniture there. So now it's actually part of their campus. They actually have created a little path to it. It was by Thorshov and Cerny. Very good architecture firm in the Twin Cities. You can kind of see how it looks now. So now I want to really quickly, and this will go a little bit faster, the medium-sized companies, light industry distributors that really fit kind of the tax backbone of this. Hope Chest is one of my favorite examples. I don't know if anyone even remembers this company anymore, but what they did is absolutely fast. Actually, less of what they did. What they were is they were direct sales companies specializing in silver, china, and linens. But how they got to this building is the most interesting part of all. You've probably seen this if you've driven 394 and looked very carefully next to the golf course. It's one side is 394. Actually, this is the 394 side of it. This is a building by Thorshov and Cerny. It's a very well-composed office and warehouse. The office portion is absolutely fascinating, and you can see the warehouse portion creeping up behind it. But what it took to build it was a lot of negotiation. So this is the initial sketch when they came to the proposal. This building proposed to build a buffer of houses between it and its residential neighbors. The process was, so again, this is 1953 in the area. The land we're talking about is a much bigger property right here. This is Brookview Golf Course. There's Louisiana Boulevard. They hadn't built the rest of it. Westwood Lake, 394. General Mills goes here, and Winnetka. So the problem was the residents had fought down a shopping strip mall that wanted to be there. They fought down a cement plant that wanted to be there. And they shot down the Hope Chest twice. Like every time they'd go to a city planning meeting, the neighbors would show up. So then eventually the owner said, Max Wainfield, and he was an entrepreneur for life. This guy started over 50 companies in his life. He just said, like, what's the issue here, guys? Like, they're like, we're tired of fighting for this. Every time one of these comes up, we have to cut short vacations. We have to make sure to show up at the city thing. He's like, look, what can I do? He was a consummate salesman. What can I do to convince you? Can I just build on a small portion on the south and build a buffer of houses around the entire thing of equal value, or equal size at least, to the houses that you already live in? And after all of this, when they went back unanimously, it was allowed. So here you see the change. These streets were built to please the neighbors. And all the houses blend right in. In fact, if you didn't know it was called the Hope Edition, you wouldn't know that's originally what the plan was. So here's the building itself. This street was added simply to please the neighbors. And then from those areas, they planted evergreens that have started to get so tall that actually they're not really blocking it anymore. But the idea was you started to, from different angles from the residential parts, not really see the warehouse building up there. Paco Corp built an award-winning building that used to be on Douglas and Olson Memorial Highway. So they were a company that worked basically in photo printing and x-ray film and all of that stuff. So they commissioned this building. It was a large office and warehouse structure. The warehouse, because it was on an inclined piece of land, they decided to come up with this interesting idea of a two-story kind of walkout lower level office connected to the large warehouse. This had won them an AIA Minnesota award. I believe on that jury was Carl Warnicki, who ended up designing Hennepin County Government Center. But again, it was really interesting, the design. It was really well lit at night. Unfortunately, at some point, somebody decided to turn it into this. You could see that same retaining wall we just saw. All the detail was stripped away. It kind of looked like a school towards the end. There's the front of it. Again, the big square overhang was gone. And that's what it looks like now. They just built that. Two giant warehouses. The one in the back is Amazon. The one in the front is something else. I don't know. So again, that one was a little bit of a loss right there. Here you can see again, 1964. They purposely made this like a baseball field for their staff. Like they had a lot of fun with this. The other reason it was popular too, and we're going to talk about this in a couple of other buildings, they could easily put a railroad spur right into the plant. Back when that was the main way of moving things. And you can see the tower over here. The company did so well, and again, Golden Canyon Valley Country Club, we'll talk about International Milk Carton Plant, and then down here, Luther Bible Institute, AKA Golden Valley Lutheran College, now the Perpich Center. Oh, by the way, we're right here, so hey. By 1969, that thing grew up even bigger. You can see they actually created a second, they mirrored the block on the front side, and then here we are today. So again, slightly more intensive use of the of the lot right there. Oh, and then we have Highlander Brothers. Brothers Amos and Danny, they were the top of the Twin Cities music industry when they commissioned this building in '64. It's a big structure. Initially, it had 43,000 square feet of space, eventually expanding out to 100,000 square feet of warehouse space. It's mostly brown brick. I love the H's in this, the Gingold pink designed. I have asked a certain person about whether or not that was intended. I'm going to turn this section over to fellow board member Jamie Heilicher, who is the son of Danny Heilicher, to talk a little bit more about this company and what his family did.
Thank you. I'm Jamie Heilicher. I'm going to give Bobak a chance to take a breath. As you can see, my father and uncle built this building in '64. It was the center of their distribution center for the music business. Basically, vinyl records was the key behind that era. Musicland was the retail portion of that business. And J.L. Marsh and the Heilicher Brothers was a distributor, or what they call a rack jobber, which if you went out to, at the time, the shopper cities of the world, they went into those stores, opened a little section. They said, just give us a little area right here. We'll put the merchandise in. We'll put the fixtures in. You don't have to pay for it until you sell it. And so every major retailer across the country wanted a department of records because it didn't cost them anything. They had the luxury of just being able to have the space, and they didn't pay for it until it was sold. So their business grew. This building is still there. It is currently we still own the building, but it's got 50 tenants in it now. It's warehouse storage. There's office building and car repair and whatever we could do to keep the building going. Just a little bit of background. I was born and raised in Golden Valley, just north of Golden Valley or just east of Golden Valley High School. My office is still in Golden Valley up on Decatur and 169. And, this building, obviously 64, I brought a show and tell if anybody is interested. This is the guest book that was passed around when the building was first completed. And in it, you can take a look, if anybody can read that. It's Elizabeth Taylor Burton, who visited, and right above her name is Hubert Humphreys. So they came to this. Burton was touring the country at this time, promoting the movie Sandpiper, if anybody's ever seen that, because there's a soundtrack that goes with it. So she was coming to the building because, they were promoting these soundtracks that went with all the movies. So just a little background, and I'll give it back to Bobak.
Just wanted to quickly go back to here because they also produced a lot of records under the Soma brand, which was his uncle Amos's name backwards. Probably the one everyone's heard was Surfin' Bird, which was recorded in Minneapolis, and his family were the ones that launched their career, among others. But that's probably the one that stayed in the cultural zeitgeist in all these years. Moving on, for some reason, there were a lot of container plants here. Well, I'm going to just mention this milk carton plant, not because it's a spectacular, like the milk carton thing. This is a national brand that just decided to build this. So they were 50 million milk cartons. That was their thing for the Minnesota, Wisconsin area. So their goal was, and I'm trying to remember that exact number, 50 million per month. People drink a lot of milk. That's all I got to say. But the reason is, when this was being built, people thought it was a school. Until they finished it, because like, there's a gymnasium in the back. So again, it's still there. It looks pretty decent. It's still pretty whole to what it is now. I mean, this, obviously another industry put this thing on the ceiling because they're doing some other work down there, but it's still, you can kind of see that school style look to it. Another one was the Federal container plant. This was a homegrown company. They built this enormous plant that's also in Olson Memorial Parkway. They were getting ready to do an even bigger expansion. They expanded this building as big as it could go. They were going to build the biggest box plant in the United States, just west of 169 in Plymouth. And then they sold the company in 1960, and the national company that had it's like, we're good. This is good enough. So it's still a box plant. And then the other one I'm going to mention is Liberty Carton, which is probably the one that everyone sees, only because you always see the white side of it, which was an addition later on when they doubled the size of that plant. Also of note, I'm going to mention the General Motors Training Center. This one is fascinating because this got built in 53 and 50, but it was finished in 54. You can see the mayor here as well as members of the General Motors family coming in to dig it in. This was designed to train 5,000 mechanics from the upper Midwest states each year. So each of the divisions had their own classroom. So, Chevrolet, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, remember them, Buick, Cadillac, GMC truck, etc. They even had a large auditorium in there. Eventually, they didn't need it anymore, and now it's Poquet Auto. And many of you may have seen it. Now, that side is still there, the nice-looking side, but it's been kind of hidden by the on-ramp to Highway 100. But it's still there, and it still has that kind of facade that was initially designed. I think it was designed in Detroit, because I can't figure out who did the architectural work on it, but a company like that may have had someone in-house. Another one I wanted to really quickly mention here is Thunderbird Plastic. So this is a house that Cootie built. Shaper Toys was a locally made company that came up with Cootie, Don't Break the Ice, and all of these other kind of games. They were popular because they used plastic rather than paper. So he got so big, at the point they built this, he had sold 6 million copies of Cootie. And this is 1956. Or 1957 when this particular image was taken. So they decided, we're just going to have our own plastic company. And then their ability to make plastic pieces got them popular, so they started to build and sell more and more plastic. This building got expanded incredibly wide. It used to be not far from some of the plants out there. This is what it looks like now. So they just recently demolished it. Yeah. Another kind of interesting, this building I wasn't going to highlight, but it's a fascinating story. American Motor Company, which later became known as AMC, they had just formed as a merger of several companies. They had Nash Autos, they had Hudson Autos. This is a simple parts plant. It's now part of the Room and Board campus as a customs pickup. I'm just going to say the loading docks still absolutely look like that, but the front has been redone. Next to it was another warehouse for a pharmaceutical company, Upjohn. Upjohn was a major company based in Kalamazoo. They had a Minnesota office since 1941. They decided, the funny thing is they originally wanted to stay in Minneapolis, but they couldn't find adequate land to build on, so they were lured out to Golden Valley. This is what it looks like now. So the original structure is still there. It is the headquarters of Room and Board. So here are the two buildings next to each other in 1962. That's that federal paper plant we also saw. And then here they are now. As you can see, they've all been blended together. If you've ever done the weekend running of the couches in the outlet, that's where you go. I have competed in the running of the couches and gotten some random red leather couch someone retired for a great price in my old house. So yeah, totally, yeah, gotta have sharp elbows there. That's all I gotta say. Go sit on it. Sit on it. Then, that's how you claim it. Postus Machine Corp. I wasn't originally going to highlight this, but when I was driving around, something about this building struck me. This is a simple, light industrial building just north of 394. Postus was a machine company founded by an entrepreneur, Chris Postus. They started as a 4-person contract machine shop, got bigger and bigger. They started to make all kinds of B2B kind of devices, expanding it randomly. But then I noticed this odd trapezoidal part in the front. I was like, I'm going to look up this. This doesn't make sense. Why would a structure like this have it? I talked to the Northwest Architectural Archive, and I found out it was designed by a person named John Howe. John Howe was known as the right hand of Frank Lloyd Wright. Like, that's not his own, like, kind of, hype machine. He really was the head draftsman for many, many years for Frank Lloyd Wright. He ended up settling in the Twin Cities. He's designed many notable houses in the area. But in 1980, Postus at this point was getting bigger and bigger. They went into the medical devices. They kept getting larger. And they decided, we want a better front entrance to that building. They hired John Howe, and I have the drawings right here of it. And we got, again, the motor equipment division, which was the original division. They moved pharmaceutical to Coon Rapids, which finally got sold in 2008. This is the way it was originally designed. There's only been some slight tweaks to it. You could see, again, very much in the Wrightian history, the way the stacked stone. This was the marquee. It wasn't finished in this picture, but it used to say just Postus right there. At some point, they updated it and removed it. This used to be overgrown. Again, the classic Google Street. I went back. You can't even see it in earlier versions because all the evergreens had grown too high. But there you go. There's a John Howe industrial building. Western Mineral Products, I'm only going to mention them because they ended up being the biggest producer or refiner of vermiculite. How do you say it here? Vermiculite. One day I'm going to get this right. You can tell I'm the science man. No, but I love this picture because vermiculite is a pebble form of asbestos. So you can see, hey, we're going to pour it in your hand. No one knew this at the time. And I'm going to use a blowtorch in your hand, and you're not going to feel the blowtorch. I looked up the CEO of the company, lived to be like 90. So clearly it wasn't necessary. But if you were from the mine that this was made, it's a tragedy, really, because, again, the mine that produced most of it in Libby, Montana, was just so much asbestos. So the plants in Minneapolis have been part of a major Minnesota Department of Health kind of research in terms of trying to mitigate the dangers of Libby asbestos. This company had moved here from Omaha and just became the biggest processor. And then in the 60s was sold to W.R. Grace, the biggest asbestos manufacturer. So again, I just thought that was kind of an interesting one to find out there. I just want to really quickly talk about how kind of industrial development works. So here's Western Golden Valley. Again, we've got the Olson Memorial Highway 55 here, Future 169, the Golden Valley Country Club, downtown. And as you can see, 1957, a railroad spur built by the railroad to try and encourage industrial development. Becton Addition, which I'll get to in a second, and you see the Golden Valley Shopping Center being built. Then, 1964, you start to see the fruits of that. You see light industry starting to form around the railroad spur. You see the General Mills, James Ford Bell Research Center. The Becton Addition is starting to fill out. And then the former Valley Plaza Shopping Center is down there. It's since been demolished now. That's where that Starbucks and a couple of other items are. And then by 69, you see it's even filling out. They got rid of all those annoying trees that were there and cleared it out for some nice industrial development. Again, the Becton Addition. Again, you'd see lots of these sorts of light industrial buildings, very typical office in front, party in the back. No, and then this is one of the more interesting ones. This is Fluidyne Engineering Company. They were They built this $300,000 in 1961 headquarters to house the company's experimental shops, as well as glass and electronic fabrication offices on the, labs on the lower level, and then engineering offices on the upper level. This company did a lot of engineering work for the aerospace industry. They manufactured wind tunnels and rocket test facilities. I just want to give a quick shout out to Ron Vick Incorporated. I don't know who designed this building with the giant portico. They have been in that building since '61. They're still there. So again, light industry, they do kind of light machining. They've done all kinds of things in their year. Similar with Heinrich Envelope Office Company and Plant. They moved there in 1962. The roof got torn off in 1965 because of that tornado that went through the city. They literally, like the CEO of the company's like, our roof got torn off. Like he was just like straight up like, it wasn't pretty. But they stayed, and they've been there since 1962. And it's kind of a sharp looking building. I love the curves on it. It's kind of an interesting one. Also want to mention that same neighborhood, former Feinberg Distributing Company, designed by Gingold Pink. This is a really interesting kind of, I was like, why is this almost sinusoidal wave? They made sausages. They made all kinds of kosher meats for deli. So I kind of thought, oh, is that kind of the vibe they were going for? This was originally brick color. Somebody did the creatively bankrupt paint it gray on the brick. It used to be this color. But again, yeah, so the company also had created a kosher rival of Spam called Brief. It didn't last. But I just thought it was one of my favorite things reading. This is before they moved into this building. And then kind of finally in this section, this was like, I couldn't figure out where to fit them, so the stepchild of this. The formidable WTCN-TV, in 1989, they became KARE 11 Studios, designed by a Miami firm. So this is kind of interesting. They were bought in 1972 by a national media company, Metro Media, and they decided we're going to turn this into a series. They were the fourth network, which was a problem in the era of only 3 networks. So they were the fourth channel. So the fourth channel, they were previously operating out of the Calhoun Beach, what we now know as the Calhoun Beach Club, which blows my mind. And it's so funny when you read the news in that era, they're like, maybe they're going to have modern ways of doing it. Apparently, in the middle of a movie, they wouldn't be like, we'll be right back. It would literally just cut to someone screaming at you in a commercial. And they were saying, like, they're going to get rid of that. They're going to actually have, like, normal TV broadcasts. So, again, it was a really exciting time for those in, I guess, the TV world. And it's kind of a fun building. I love this kind of, these concrete panels and the use of glass. Again, it's kind of a fun structure out there. And then, meanwhile, retail is also developing in parallel. I'm going to try and keep this moving. Sorry about how much material we have here. This is the mall I just wanted to talk about because everyone's forgotten about it. Golden Hills Shopping Center, 1950-51. This was supposed to be the big thing. It was advertised as it was going to be the biggest, basically, well, they called it mall, but now we call it strip mall in the region. It was going to have 23 stores. It was going to be, well, it was anchored by a grocery store. They were going to have a cocktail bar on this side. They were going to have a hotel on the other side. National food stores ended up being one of the anchors. It was right off of 100 and 394. How perfect a location could be. The Golden Hills Shopping Center, come before it grows even bigger. And then it became part of the development district, which tells you that didn't work out. So here is, and I apologize how zoomed out this is. This is 1953. Here we have 100, the Beltline. Here we have Highway 12, Future 394, Prudential buildings actually being built out here, as we talked about. Tyrell Hills, the original. Highway 100, this is Turner's Crossroad. It still exists back there, but it actually used to be a crossroad. This was the plot they were planning to use. And this is now West End, if you know what we're talking about, the West End Mall and all that stuff. Here's what it looks like now. Now, the Boulevard Good Day Cafe building, from what I can tell, uses the footprint, but it's not the same building. It county dates it to 88. It doesn't look anything on the ground like that, but the footprint kind of follows it. But the problem was it was just never in a good spot. Everyone kept missing it. And meanwhile, grand opening a few years later, Golden Valley Shopping Center, anchored by Jensen Super Value, which moved into a new, what they claimed at the time was the biggest grocery super value stop in the entire region, and Knight's Pharmacy on the other end. This is the original section. It's been added so many times that it's almost hard to see it. It's always had these interesting V-shaped supports for this portico on the outside. I really enjoy that. So I just want to give you a quick evolution of it. So in 1956, they'd already built the original section here. Then you get the first expansion. Second expansion comes at this end, again, and they fill in that space that was left in the back. And then by 1967, you have the whole shape. They actually connected to this kind of outbuilding that was over here, a former garage. Here we are, 2024. This is one of those buildings where the roof line really tells you a story if you know where to look. This is how you can cut it up. There's phase 1, these 2 sections, phase 2, this section, phase 3, and then phase 4. So there you go, kind of a fascinating look at that. Just wanted to mention Red Crown Lanes. It was originally a bowling alley, later known as Celebrity Lanes, because you used to have like George McCann and several members of the Twins were the owners of Celebrity Lanes, so that's why they kind of, or I don't know how much they were hands-on, but again, like they were part of that, and then it became 2 different audio companies, including now Halstone, which is there now. They added the H because it wasn't there in earlier iterations. And then I really wanted to get to, Minneapolis, and you're going to notice I say Minneapolis Federal Savings and Loan, later known as Midwest Savings and Loan, later known as bankrupt. So this is a great example of the mid-century movement and how it appears in commercial architecture, because by mid-century, bank branches started to become a thing. Some states used to not allow bank branches, and they had to change certain rules on who could even have a branch office. And therefore, some companies use this as an opportunity to pursue modern designs that could be part of their brand. At the time, this company, Minneapolis Federal, ran under the slogan, the progressive one. That was their actual slogan in all the papers. This is a great sketch of this original design. They built 8 of them. This is the only one that really survives, correct? Most of them were demolished. This is the only one that really survived. I love how the aluminum goes all the way up here. That really makes a big difference here. In the run-up to the opening, the bank's ad described it, I love it, the contemporary circular offices are visual interpretations of the progressive new look of Minneapolis Federal. At the grand opening, they said, a complete circle of savings and home loan services is housed in this contemporary circle of glass and steel, this exciting, new, progressive look of Minneapolis Federal in the suburbs. Not only is the look modern and unique, but the service is key to match it. I mean, whoever wrote that earned it, I love it. You have this great, again, the idea of using solar glass as a brise-soleil, kind of sun shading around it. And it had a drive-in from the beginning, for the record. Again, let's add, we began with this simple shape. And then ended with that. The marketing for this was glorious. And again, this is the original symbol of the company. They called it the sign of the tree. Sometimes it had the slogan around it, a good tree to come to for shelter, except in the 80s. There was a drive-up window, again, on the other side. Here you can see the remnants of it. It's now lamp stores, as you've ever seen it. You've seen that. It's just been blocked off, but this is the old driveway window. It's still there. I think the owner was looking at me while I was taking this random picture from the back, but I was like, whoa! It used to be in some bad shape only about a decade ago. These are some of my older photos of the building. If you ever really want to look at it, go get yourself a nice brat at New Bohemia, and you can get this wonderful view of the structure and kind of enjoy your brat and mid-century architecture while you're at it. Again, I love it as a building that kind of looked kind of like a UFO or a lamp. It works great as a lamp store right now. When it opened, by the way, the giveaways are so funny. The giveaway was like a 1965 Buick four-door and 2 fridges. So again, I don't know. It's too late to enter for it now. I want to also really quickly mention Byerly's. They do have a great display here in the Golden Valley Historical Society Museum about it. Don Byerly and his dad, who is on the board of SuperValue, decided to open a grocery store to try and go into the luxe region of it, a prestige market. It claimed to be the largest in the Twin Cities upon opening on this site. It was pitched initially as the ultimate in modern food shopping, offered in a beautiful and immaculate store, designed especially to accommodate the modern shopper's needs, convenience, and most importantly, her food budget, which again, the patriarchy, but okay. The store boasted carpeting, which they also noted meant it was actually cheaper to replace. And again, I love these stores because they used to have a home economist hostess to advise on meal planning recipes and menus. Lots of things. They obviously had a post office in it. They had a restaurant. They had a fountain. They had chandeliers. They had a section for records. So maybe they had was that part of the, They had a Bachman's flowers, and again, their shopping carts, they were so proud of these, custom designed, and there was a psychology behind it. Don Byerly explained, they are wider and shallower, and we're using them partly for psychological reasons. They look smaller, but actually hold more than regular carts. But you also didn't have to bend, so that was a nice thing, and they nested right into those things. And again, here you see a wonderful photo of Don Byerly and Mrs. Ruby Peterson, the home economist, right when it opened. And they used to have fashion shows there. Fashion a la shopping cart. Waka, waka, waka. And there we have it today. And the last section I want to go through is the professionals. This is fantastic. I had no idea this was a plan. So Glenwood Hills had hospitals on it, and there are still some medical centers over there. At one point, there was this plan to put medical towers, a hospital, a nurses' school, all in that area that now just has kind of that neighborhood, the kind of generic, kind of behind the gate neighborhood over there right now. I don't know. Nowhere here was there any price on this. And as you can imagine, somebody probably ran the numbers. It was really funny, too, because one of the Ewald brothers, the family that had the dairy, was on, like, he's down here in the bottom left. He was part of this project because he was also on the board of the hospital. It just didn't go anywhere. But this, I had no idea this was ever a plan. And when I saw this picture, I was like, what? How? Like, that would have changed the face of the medical profession here. Of course, there was a hospital out there. There were two buildings. That was the second one built in the 60s. But really what I wanted to go to is the Minneapolis Clinic of Psychiatry and Neurology right on the north side of Sweeney Lake. This is probably one of the most significant architectural buildings here in the city of Golden Valley. Bruce Abramson, one of the principals of Hamill, Green and Abramson, was the lead designer of this. This has received just numerous awards after it was built. As you can see, just very glassy, very open. The approach was, well, again, I just kind of want to jump real quick to another section. You're dealing with the client required designs catering to therapy and patient welfare. They wanted a warm, inviting, and residential character. Bruce Abramson noted that it was an unusual client because the psychiatrists tended to dwell in ambiguity. So the design responded with natural materials, non-institutional scale, and taking full advantage of the lakeside site, all contributing to an environment that is designed to put the patient at ease. The interior arrangement was organized around the kind of practice. 12 psychologists' offices were placed on the second floor of their wing and split into pods, of 4 doctors' offices with associated support staff, separated by waiting rooms and stairwells. They wanted to have smaller waiting rooms and 2 means of egress for patients that may not want to walk back to a waiting room and give them more comfort. They found that patients didn't like to be in crowded rooms, so by breaking up the wait rooms, they were doing something to try and create a certain level of peace. Meanwhile, the neurologists had a single-story wing because their patients were oftentimes less ambulatory, and stairs could be a bit of a challenge. This building won several awards, again, and it was featured in many national magazines. The first one it received was the AIA Minnesota Honor Award. The jury in '67 called it, it shows great concern for the satisfaction of the patient as well as the doctor, carefully integrated into the landscape. It won an AIA Minnesota 25-year award in 2002, basically lasting the test of time. It also won a national award co-sponsored by the American Institute of Architects and the American Association of Medical Clinics, and again, sort of showing that it was the first honor award that year, summarizing that it was, again, a serene and therapeutic environment for the emotionally upset patients it serves. The aspect of the lake and the beautiful landscape from the waiting rooms and doctors is exceptionally noteworthy. The scale is human. The space is skillfully organized to function. The non-institutional character makes it unique, but not at the expense of the pragmatic requirements of a successful clinic. Here's actually the award being received. That's Bruce Abramson on the right, and then one of the owners of the clinic in the middle. It's aged well today. I love the glass. I love the way they use this kind of the boulders on top of these berms. There was actually a way to get past zoning requirements. They weren't allowed to build anything more than 1.5 stories. This is a classic way to fake a 1.5-story building. You build an earth berm up. Now it's not on the ground. It's a little bit underground. But again, it actually worked really well. The building is great in any season. I recommend, if you haven't seen it, just drive by it. It's a beautiful structure. It's on the north end of Sweeney Lake, which is off of, is that Olson Memorial Park? Golden Valley Road, sorry. Right at the border, right before you get to Theodore Wirth Parkway.
It's next to Courage Center.
Yes, absolutely, which is part of that, a lot of the legacy of the medical profession that's been out there. So Valley Square Professional Building. This is kind of an underknown building here. It built in '73 by designed by Architectural Alliance. It also won an AIA award in 1974 because of how simple the design was. It was designed for dentists, and the structure, which is still there and used as a dental office, was intended to have, again, the designers noted two primary reasons that went through their design, which they wanted to be modest and quiet in appearance. The first reason was to try and alleviate, in our own small way, the inner apprehensions of most dental patients by keeping the exterior quiet, both visual in form and in color, and orienting the operatories towards the golf course view. We have attempted to alleviate those apprehensions. Secondly, the neighborhood is low scale and reasonably quiet, especially the golf course. We decided we wanted the building to fit into the existing atmosphere and belong in the neighborhood from the very beginning of its operation. So they went with a quiet restraint with this buff brick. They also went with reflective glass, so it wouldn't need curtains, so the doctors could look longingly at the golf course. But again, by the way, I noticed this is a really nice, you can see right through the building from this side. It's just a nice clean hallway all the way through. This is the side that faces the golf course. So again, maximum view of the links there on the Golden Valley Golf Course out there. And really not far from here as well. Just want to do a couple of quick notes. Some other professional groups I want to mention. There are a couple of architecture firms of note here. Armstrong and Schickling was one of the most significant mid-century firms in the Twin Cities. They did a lot of great work in places of worship and schools that won many awards. They're still here. They're ATSR, and they just moved, I think, just basically down the way. They're still in the city of Golden Valley. This is their original office, just off Olson Memorial Highway, just basically, again, south of that Tesla and room and board section right there. You know it's an architectural office when they're subtly advertising with this cantilevered canopy over their entrance. Like, hey, look what we can do. It's been turned into a school, which is kind of fitting. I've actually seen many small architectural offices turned into schools. They brought in lots of natural light so they could be drafting, and a lot of times it actually worked really well for a school. So it's a Head Start program now. Eckbert Petrie Architects, slightly younger firm, was also in this area. They built a structure right on the point of 55 and Douglas, that's it. Yeah, and so this building, it's been added on to a lot. It's clearly been turned at one point in its life to a bank branch, but it was the original square here in trapezoid. These pyramidal parts were added later, and now it's a Montessori. So again, they turn into schools really well. A couple of others right next to that original Armstrong Schickling, the American Federation of Grain Millers, which was the headquarters for that particular member of the AFL was built out here. It's got that really nice copper fascia up there. I just wanted to mention it. This legal office was also fascinating. I couldn't figure out who the architect was, but an architect was clearly behind it in 1966. These round corners, the way it was built by a law firm that actually occupied some of it and then rented out the rest. The law firm was actually the oldest one originally in St. Louis Park before it moved out there. It was found by husband-wife team of Anton, I think it's Yingvi. I forgot how to say this. Anyone know how to say this off the top of their head? There you go. Yingvi. Yingvi. They were originally in the Park Theater building. The husband and wife team retired in 1966, and the sons took over the firm and started it out here. At the time it was built, John Yingvi was actually in the Minnesota House of Representatives, and later on the U of M's Board of Regents, and then chair of the Metro Transit Commission. And then just a couple of other things. We start to see the rise of the office park. So 1973, 1976, it was originally going to be 5 buildings. They built 3. We get the Westwood Lake Office Park, the only part of Golden Valley that's kind of south of 394, by what we now know as BWBR. It's kind of an interesting classic commercial park. Valley Square Office Center by Edward Baker Associates. Again, we're trying to see the maturity of bringing in more of these commercial works, and then wrapping up with the Worth Park Office Center right there facing Theodore Worth Park, now basically known as the Mortensen Building. So that's basically it. I wanted to thank all of you for being here. Really, you can see how the city matures and how kind of got the tax base to keep the city from turning, I don't want to say from turning into Richfield, but at least a nice, diverse, economic environment. If you have questions, I'm here. Otherwise, you can reach out to me. I know we have a handheld mic if anyone has questions, and I guess that's all I got. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
useful like Google Street View can be, and I'm a Google Street View photographer, so I appreciate that.
Thank you for your service.
I focus on at-risk historic buildings. I'm always looking for how I can find out more buildings, which buildings are at risk before they are demolished. I'm just looking if you have any idea for...
That's a great question. So the question was, how do you identify buildings that could be at risk, that could be torn down? And it's a bit tricky. Sometimes you get people, it's easier to ask for forgiveness and ask for permission. You see that a lot in residential architecture, especially in more affluent areas like Los Angeles, where a mid-century house might get suddenly demolished. Oh, whoops, sorry. Commercial, usually you need permits, so sometimes those end up going before the planning commissions, especially because usually you're not going to most of the time you don't tear down a building without a plan of what that's going to be there next. So especially in a particular city, like I live in the city of Minnetonka, I occasionally will look at the planning commission, see what's coming up. And occasionally you'll get signs that build. That's how, for example, Docomomo, we don't necessarily go to the barricades for every building that might get demolished, but that's sometimes how we find out that a structure might be threatened, especially one that we consider particularly significant. Or people will let us know because they'll be like, hey, I just saw this appear on the docket for an upcoming commission meeting, or just through the grapevine. But it's tricky. You're right. Sometimes I'm updating another building on that registry map, and I notice I've got like one of the marks on an empty lot or something that clearly was built recently, and I'm like, I wonder when that one went. So it's unfortunate, and especially tracking the built environment can be difficult, especially since some people don't understand like the strength of certain laws here. Like if you don't live in like New York City, where New York Landmarks Commission can really mess you up if you decide to do something without their permission. Most cities don't have that strong of teeth if they even have any kind of historical protections. Some people will think, oh, well, if you're on the National Register of Historic Places, that'll help. No, you can do whatever you want to a building. All that does, for the record, the lowest level, not National Landmark, National Register of Historic Places, if a federal project would affect it, the federal agency has to stop and figure out if they can mitigate. But nobody else is controlled by that. So again, it's not the best answer, but the best thing to do is kind of working on the local level and just trying to see if there's anything in a planning commission that might be hinting something. Like, for example, some houses in Minnetonka, I'll see the blue sign that they'll put up like, this is going to be on the docket. And then you're like, oh, there's the heads up that something's happening. Okay, thanks. Thank you.
What are your top resources for researching for people who want to learn more about where they live?
I have created a map that I am not going to lie is probably one of the best resources for the mid-century era. Now, I'm not going to say like it's going to help with Pioneer era or things past around 1982, but it's tricky. Like I have found newspapers.com is useful for the Western Twin Cities because they don't yet have the Pioneer Press. And Minneapolis papers were less likely to report on things in St. Paul or things, in their, sphere of influence, So that gets a little bit tricky. So it's a little, and I would say, depending on the regions, there are sometimes some very strong historical societies like this one, where they can also be very valuable. There's also the Hennepin County Museum. There's also the Northwest Architectural Archive. That one's good, but you kind of have to know what you're going for and if they have it available. And to a lesser extent, sorry, I'm kind of throwing a few more in there, planning departments can also be useful, but it depends what records they possess. Minneapolis is phenomenal now. They put all their permits online. St. Paul has them through the Ramsey County Historical Society, which finally put them online, but when you're at the level of intense research I am, some of it got lost. And that's because some of them got damaged. It's a whole long story with that. The fact that they even have them is good. But there's some big holes in Ramsey County, I should say in the city of St. Paul. But that's a great question. Thank you.
How do you get to your register?
If you Google Minnesota Modern Map, you'll probably get it, Minnesota Modern Registry, or just go to the Docomomo USMN website. I always say Minnesota Modern Map is probably going to sit in your head a little bit more readily than Docomomo, just in terms of memorization. Thank you, not Deutschland. Thank you, the Dutch. But again, that is the way to reach it. We also have cards with the links. Oh yes, and if you're here, we have cards that are available with the links.
Well, thank you, Bobak, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you all for coming.